Hi everyone, I'm Shelly from There's No Place Like Home at redheadmom8.wordpress.com. Today I just wanted to talk to you about another thing that I've noticed that can really sabotage your homeschool. And first you need to ask yourself the question, are you overcomplicating your homeschool? You know, I have noticed when it comes to doing things that end up kind of taking us down the wrong path in our homeschool lives, it's that a lot of the things that we do that cause these things are brought on by fear. Fear is something that in some cases can really be good and can be helpful, but you know, I found that a lot of times when it comes to us homeschooling parents, the fears that we have very often lead us down a path that can really make our homeschool turn into something that we never really intended it to be. And that's really what I wanted to talk to you about today, because I have seen it happen over and over again that people are just overcomplicating their homeschools. And you know, I have really noticed that there are 3 instances that can really cause this to happen. And you know, there could definitely be more reasons that cause this to happen, but I'm going to just go over 3 things that might cause some homeschooling parents to just try to take on way too much. And in the end, yeah, they end up sabotaging what they so wanted to do right. So one of the very first reasons that people start overcomplicating their homeschool is if they're new homeschooling parents. And you know, this is something that it's kind of expected. New homeschooling parents are very often very nervous. We have all been there at some point. I remember when I first started homeschooling, I was excited, but I was also pretty terrified that I was just going to mess everything up. And so that's why I know that there are a lot of homeschooling parents out there who feel that way too. Add to that the fact that states each have like their own set of requirements, their own set of subjects that they expect homeschooling parents to cover. And to a parent who is not really well versed in how things actually can be done in a homeschool, the very first thing that they are going to feel when they look at that entire list of subjects is completely overwhelmed. And you know, I'm from Pennsylvania, and we've got this huge list of things that are supposed to be covered, like, you know, spelling and reading and writing and fire safety, social studies, Pennsylvania history, U.S. history, science, geography. And when you just, I mean, there's more, but when you look at the list, you just, for the very first time especially, you're just like, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? So what ends up usually happening is that parents will think that they have to tackle each of those subjects separately, and very often they will dive in and buy a separate curriculum for each one of those topics. And I cannot tell you how sad it makes me to see new homeschooling parents post a list of the curriculum that they got, say, for their first grader, and there's like 12 textbooks there. I can't even just say how sad that makes me, because I was there. I was one of those people who overcomplicated my homeschool, and it really ruined our home situation, not just our homeschool, but our relationships with each other, to the point that I just sent my kids back to school for 2 years. And so this is something that is really, really near and dear to my heart. Do not overcomplicate your homeschool. You do not need to jam all of these different things into your homeschool day in order for your kids to adequately learn. And if you actually look at it really closely, if you're bringing in all these separate things, your kids are only learning very tiny tidbits of a bunch of information. What are the odds that they're going to remember it? What are the odds that they're going to be interested enough to want to remember it? And the fact is that all of those required subjects that your states are telling you that you have to do, they can easily be done by combining things. And I don't think that a lot of homeschooling parents actually think of that. But yeah, just as with life, we don't separate anything into subjects. You don't have to do that in your homeschool either. For example, if you are reading a biography of Nikola Tesla to your kids, you might think right off the bat, okay, he was a scientist, so that covers science. But additionally, that would cover history, that would cover language arts, especially if the child was reading it to themselves. And, depending on what the biography contained in it, it even might include some math, especially for those more, motivated students who are really into that. And, looking into it another way is just taking a walk to the creek. What could that cover? That could cover science, because you would be out in nature. Physical education, because you're going for a walk, and if it's warm out, it's likely that your kids will be wading and splashing around in the creek. If your kids have a nature study journal, that could be art. It could be writing. And you know what? It's even geography, especially for younger kids who are first learning their way around the neighborhood. They can find their way how to get to different places, and you can even discuss some of the geographical things that you're passing as you get there. You could talk about north, south, east, and west. You don't need to have a specific book, one for science and one for geography and one for writing and one for, what was the other thing that I said? Art. You don't need to do that. And I'm not telling you to never go out and buy any textbooks at all. But what I'm telling you is don't go out and buy 12 textbooks. It's completely unnecessary. And when it really comes down to it, you don't actually even need a textbook to cover most subject areas. I would say that the only subject that is really, a lot of parents feel is absolutely necessary is math. And there are even some parents who don't even feel that textbooks are necessary for math. But for most of us, math is that one area that we're just like, whoa, no, we definitely need a textbook for that. But all those other areas are so easily covered in so many different ways. And, if you think about the reasons that you decided to homeschool, and, I don't know why you decided to homeschool. There are lots of reasons that people decide to homeschool. But if one of those reasons that you decided to homeschool is that school just wasn't working for your child, or that you thought that it wouldn't work for your child, why would you try to replicate it at home? Let your kids be curious. Let them follow their interests. If you are giving your kids 6 hours of schoolwork every single day, they're just not going to have the time, they're not going to have the energy to go after the things that are actually going to impact them, because those things that they're interested in, those are the things that they're going to remember. Those are the things that are going to in some way possibly help them in the future. Very often those things that you are teaching to your kids, they're likely not going to remember them, especially if you're just feeding too much stuff to them at once. So, and especially, I'm going to go back to younger kids, because as much as it bothers me to see like dozens of textbooks being used for homeschooled kids, especially for younger kids like first graders and second graders, even kindergartners, these kids learn best at this point through play. They learn best through doing. They learn best by even just helping their parents around the house and learning through life. And all of the subject areas that states require can easily be covered that way. Now, another reason that I've noticed that a lot of people tend to overcomplicate their homeschool is if their kids have now reached the high school years. And I found that, a lot of homeschooling families start out like what I just talked about. I started out that way, where you completely overcomplicate things because you don't know how to do it. You jam too much stuff in. You notice that your kids aren't learning. You notice that there's a lot of stress going on and people are fighting and not wanting to do their work. And so I would have to say that most homeschooling families tend to find a happy medium after they've been doing it for a while. And yes, they do tend to relax a little bit, and they do tend to realize that the things that kids are picking up on their own, or just through simply doing life, are often just as important, if not more important, than the things that are actually being covered in that structured curriculum. But what ends up happening is when these families have kids enter the high school years, especially if they have never been through it before, panic sets in, because they realize that, oh my gosh, this is like the home stretch. These are the last 4 years that I am going to have with my child. What if I mess everything up? What if I completely ruin their future by not doing things right? So what do? They revert back to that old way of doing things, of bringing in all of the textbooks and covering all of these different subject areas and just, again, cramming everything in there because they want to cover it all. And first, I just really want to point out, there's no way you're going to cover it all. That's like one thing that I think a lot of us homeschooling parents don't understand, is that no one covers it all. No matter what, no matter if the kids are in public school or private school, if they go to a charter school, if they're unschooled, if they're school at home, it doesn't matter. You're never going to cover it all. And so that's something that I think that we really, really have to make peace with. So at this point in time, this fear will cause parents to just start looking again at everything as compartmentalized learning. Like they just keep kind of breaking apart those subject areas again. And yes, I'm speaking from experience because I have done this myself. And what kids at this age really need to be learning most is they need to be given the opportunity to know what it is that they need to learn to be an adult. This is the time for them to possibly find a job. This is a time for them to learn how to manage a checking account, or to learn how to budget. This is a really great time for them to get some volunteer work in. And I just have to ask you, and I've said this on a few of my other videos, but I'm going to ask you again. What do you remember from your high school years? I probably only remember about 5 to 10% of what I actually learned in high school. I got good grades, but did it stick with me? No. I memorized it long enough to take that test, and once I knew that I wouldn't need it anymore, I didn't care anymore to kind of focus on it. So it just went out my mind, and I don't think about it anymore. And the thing is that if that's how high school was for you too, I'm going to say again what I said earlier. Why would you try to replicate methods that didn't work for you? Why would you take that method and put it into your homeschool if it's something that likely is not going to have an impact on your child? These high school years are the time for your child to learn to be an adult. This is also the time that they can really hone those researching skills that you have hopefully been encouraging them to do throughout their homeschool years. Finding research on your own and just learning how to learn. Those are the most crucial things that you can teach your kids. And these final years of homeschooling, those are the time for them to really, really crack down on those researching skills, especially if they plan on going to college, because then they will be able to actively find out what it is that they need to know to get into college. And, that in itself could be, a project of their own to do. I think that a lot of times parents will research what kids need to get into college, but let your child find out what it is that they need to get into college, because very often those kids who are motivated enough to do that, they are going to easily cover the things that they know they're going to need because they have a real purpose, a purpose that goes beyond just getting an A on a report card or a pat on the back. So remember that. Do not overcomplicate your homeschooled high schoolers, because this is honestly the time that they need the most freedom, because this is the time that they are learning to be an adult. So the last way that I'm going to talk about today that I've noticed that overcomplicating your homeschool can set in is when comparison rears its ugly head. And I talked about this the other day in my video about when your child is not a homeschool prodigy. But if you take a look around us, we are living in a world of social media. So everywhere that you look, you are going to see posts by homeschool moms. Homeschool moms who are posting pictures of these beautiful Pinterest-worthy projects that, if you're anything like me, you would never be able to do. Or you're seeing people posting about how their child has learned 3 languages and now they're researching how to translate Sanskrit. Or you will find a family who has posted a whole line of pictures of them helping out at the soup kitchen, helping out at the homeless shelter, packing 12,000 Operation Christmas Child boxes, and they did this all in one day. And I'm being tongue-in-cheek here, but honestly, that's what it can feel like when you see all of these people posting these pictures of things that you just think to yourself, oh my gosh, what am I doing wrong? Our homeschool doesn't look like that. And I really, really, really have to say this to you. Very often, homeschooling families will post the pictures of the highlights of their homeschool. And it makes sense because they don't want to share just like the everyday mundane things, because a lot of times they think, well, who wants to see that? But you know what? There is something beautiful to be found in the mundane. And I think that it's really something that we homeschooling parents need to start sharing with one another, because that is something that I think a lot of us have issues with. There's actually a blog called The Sacred Mundane, and I love that phrase, the sacred mundane, because very often we don't think about those everyday things. Those are the things that we need to share. So yes, so there might be families out there who are posting these like fantastic feats that their kids have done. Or, like I said in my Prodigy video, yeah, there are families who have kids who become surgeons by the time they're 18. But the fact is that most of us are not like that. You do not need to compare yourself with them. So I don't want you to think that you have to start again pulling in all this extra curriculum, pulling in all this outside stuff, because your kids just don't measure up to what you see on someone else's social media page. Just remember that, again, you're not seeing the whole picture. The grass is not always greener on the other side. And I also really want to point out to you that what works in one family will not always work in another family. Plus, and this is tacking on off of when I said that they don't always tell you everything. Even though you might have a family telling you, because I know a lot of times, like in homeschool co-ops and homeschool groups, you will have a lot of relaxed homeschoolers who feel like they're not doing enough, because a lot of these homeschool groups do have parents who are separating all the subjects and teaching their kids through 12 textbooks and doing all of these separate topics that you have never even thought about doing with your kids, because you have been embracing a life of simplicity. And I just, again, want to reiterate to you that this isn't something that you also have to do, because even though they might be doing all of those textbooks, you don't know what their homeschool looks like in reality. You don't know what they're like relationally. You don't know how much the kids are retaining. You don't know what the entire atmosphere of it is. And am I saying that all of those families are not going to have good homeschools? Absolutely not. I happen to know that there are families that thrive in that kind of homeschool situation. But I also want to tell you that you need to embrace what is yours. You need to embrace the uniqueness of your child and of your family. And I don't ever want you to feel like you're not doing enough. I don't want you to feel like you have to pull in all these additional things just because the world thinks that school is supposed to look that way. Look at a typical school day. What is it, like 8 periods a day usually? I'm not sure. Around when I went, it was 7 periods. I think now it might be that they have 8 periods. That means at least 8 different subjects every day. And a lot of times they will switch throughout the week. So they definitely have more than 8 subjects that they're learning. And so, yeah, the world will look at that as what school is supposed to look like. But for those of us who are awake to what the purposes of school are, keep that in mind. And also, I'm going to add that you want to stay far away from comparing what your kids are doing to what schooled kids are doing. If they have friends who are in school, your kids don't have to be learning the same thing that their friends are. Again, embrace the uniqueness of your children, because chances are the things that you push on your kids and push on them, just because you're fearful, it's not going to have a lasting impact. Find those things that are going to have a lasting impact on your kids. Relax a little bit. Find something that is simple and effective, because you know what? When it comes to homeschooling, slow and steady wins the race. Very often, you might jump in full speed ahead and just have all of these different things that you're doing with your kids. But Burnout is likely to happen if you start out that way. Pace yourself. Know your kids, know their interests, and know what you can handle. And, you know, I was going to say put your blinders on when it comes to other homeschooling families, but I'm going to be honest. Sometimes it can be a positive thing to see things in other homeschooling families that you would like to do. Because if I would never have looked at any other homeschooling families, I would never have known what notebooking was. And that is something that I love now. My kids love it. It is a huge part of our homeschool now. So you have to learn to use discernment. If you feel like you want to start doing something because it's something that your kids would enjoy or because it looks interesting, then yes, by all means do it. But if you want to start doing something just because you feel like you have to because you're not doing enough with your kids, those are the things to watch out for. So anyway, that's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one down below. And if you like my work, you can check out my Patreon page and see what rewards I have for my patrons there. And I hope you have a great day.